In this video, we're going to talk about the 5 main reasons most non-tech entrepreneurs miss the mark with the launch of their no-code apps and their app-based businesses, and ultimately fail when it comes to scaling those. We're going to break down each of these 5 points so that you can avoid falling victim to the same fate. Now, make sure you stick around until the end because we're going to talk about the most initial points and roadblocks really that you need to look at first. And we're going to work our way up to things you need to consider and keep in mind, even right when you're about to launch your app. Each of these are relevant at the right time, so make sure you stick around for that. Now, first, if you're new around here, my name is Kristen, and I'm the co-founder of Coaching No Code Apps, where we help business owners and industry experts build custom apps to either start their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses, all without coding and with no technical background required. So we're going to dive right into this because we've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs in taking them from their idea stage to bringing on those first users and scaling their apps afterwards. And I want to make sure you have all the right information to move forward confidently and correctly with your app. So what I'm going to do is share my screen, and we're going to jump over to the whiteboard here. So you can see this pyramid on my screen, and there are 5 layers here. The first layer we're going to look at, like I said, is that most foundational piece. So we're going to start by looking at the things you should be considering when you're just starting out with your app, or even before you've started. And we're going to work our way to the top and talk about the things that you should be considering right as you're launching. Each of these is just as important, but they're more important at certain times throughout your app's development and launch and scale. So the very first thing that I see leading entrepreneurs to just miss the mark with their apps is when they have an undeveloped idea. Okay. When they have an undeveloped idea. Now, an undeveloped idea can mean a number of different things, but what we're going to look at are 3 factors that actually do develop an idea and make it or turn it into something rather that you can confidently move forward with. So there are 3 things to look at when validating your app idea and kind of solidifying that, okay, this is what I'm moving forward with, and I'm confident that with this, I should be building a scalable app to now launch to users and scale from there versus, like a prototype or a quick litmus test or something like that. So the things you need to look at, we're going to bring this right out here, are number 1, your market needs. You need to look at your market needs. Now, this is the most obvious component, right? You have to be creating an app that people need, but you need to make sure you've identified the market, number 1. And again, you just need to make sure that you have actually pinpointed their exact needs. Now, what does that entail? Well, it means you have identified a specific problem that a specific market or segment of a market is experiencing, and you need to have identified how it can be solved or what they need in order to solve that problem and achieve a specific outcome on the other side. Okay, that makes up the market need. So you need to have that first and foremost. Now, the next thing you need to have identified are market gaps. Market gaps are pretty simple, holes in the market. So you've identified a market that has certain needs. You know what they want. You know what they're struggling with right now. More likely than not, they have current solutions that are filling those needs in some way. Current solutions don't have to look like apps. It might be manual processes. It might be using spreadsheets. It might be using apps, but maybe those apps just aren't filling their needs as to the fullest extent, rather. So when you're looking at market gaps, you're looking at those market needs that you've identified, and then you're seeing where their existing solutions are falling short. So where are the holes in the market, right? Where are the holes in these existing alternatives or these existing solutions? By making sure you've identified market gaps, it means you're not just copying other apps that are out there on the market already, because you're not going to go very far in terms of scaling your app and your app-based business. If all you're doing is copying other things that are already out there, you have to differentiate yourself in some way. Looking for holes in the market, or holes in those existing solutions rather, is a way to do that. So you've identified the needs, you've identified market gaps, and then what you need to stack on top of that are your own experiences. Okay. When some people come into the app space, they kind of come up with a sort of a random app idea. Maybe they do identify a problem, or they identify something that's just not very efficient, and they come up with an app idea. Now, as entrepreneurs, we are thinkers, first and foremost, constantly thinking about new solutions, new tools, new ways to do things. We're constantly identifying problems. We're constantly having ideas for new businesses, and all of these things. But to have a fully developed idea, you have to be bringing something to the table, right? So if you've identified market needs and you've identified market gaps, so you have kind of the foundation of the actual solution that you'll be creating, what do you bring to the table? That's what kind of brings this full circle and makes sure that your idea is fully developed to the point that you actually have insight, experience, knowledge coming into this as well, because that's where a lot of people fall short. Like I said, it kind of just come up with a random idea, and I understand, I understand why it happens. But then, if they move forward with it, it often just falls flat because there's no foundation behind it. Okay, so you have to make sure that you are bringing something to the table as well, and that's going to help you fully develop your idea. And when you have identified these three things, you will essentially be able to move forward confidently, right, with your app, but you'll also be able to make sure that you don't launch with a really big hole in your plan, right? That is going to lead you to ultimately failing with the growth and the scale of your business, or just having a really hard time and having to do a bunch of backtracking once you do actually launch. Okay, so that's the first level in our pyramid here. The second one is when you have actually, let me switch back colors here. When you have an undeveloped plan. Okay, an undeveloped plan for your app. So not every app should be built and launched in the same way. Okay, every entrepreneur's goals and products and markets are always going to be different. Right? You're going to find similarities, but ultimately, when we're talking about apps, we're talking about custom solutions, right? You are building a custom, unique solution. So your product and your market, right, they're going to be different than other entrepreneurs or other apps that you see out there, right? Your goals will be different as well. So what a lot of people do when they try to launch their apps is they just look at what other people are doing and they try to copy those strategies and those tactics. Okay. But again, when you're copying someone else, or you're copying another app, or you're copying another tactic, you don't know if their goals, market, and product align with your own. So you're kind of just guessing, right? You are just moving forward blindly with your app. You have to have a plan that combines those three things, right? Your goals, your product, and your market. You have to build your own plan for developing and launching your app based around those things for you personally, not those things as they look for someone else, right? Because you just can't know that. And so, even the best strategies that have helped other companies, other apps, other entrepreneurs grow, right? They're not the right strategy for you if they aren't relevant to your own needs, and they're definitely not the right strategies for you if it's not the right time to use them, because even the best plans and strategies aren't going to be right if they're used at the wrong time. And so again, a lot of people try to launch by just looking at what others are doing, but usually it's just irrelevant to them. Okay. And this is something that's just broadly missed. Understanding that you have to customize these things to yourself. So, what can you do? Well, there's a really simple way to kind of form the foundation of your plan. What you need to look at are three things. So, we're going to bring this one out here. You need to look at your personal and your own company's goals or your own business goals. And you need to look at your market needs. So we're going to say goals here. Now I'm saying personal and company goals because you actually have to have those, right? Again, you can't just grab what someone else is doing and think that it's going to work for you because you don't know what their goals are. You have to know what yours are, especially if you don't know what your own are, then you're gonna have a really hard time moving forward. So what are your goals? Do you want to create an app-based business that allows you to live a certain lifestyle? Do you want to create an app that will allow you to transition away from your current career, turn it into a scalable business that allows you to work from wherever you are, work for your own schedule, that supports your family, right? What do you want? What do you want from this, right? What do you want to do with the company? Do you want your company to serve a certain segment of the market because you feel really passionate about that and you want to help them, right? What are your goals? You have to figure that out. And then you have to look at the market needs. Okay. You have to look at the market needs. So again, going back to what we talked about in the last point, the market needs, right? Look at those. What are the overarching needs? What are they trying to achieve, right? You identified a problem. You have to identify an outcome too. What are they looking to achieve? This doesn't have anything to do with features. It's just an outcome, okay? And you want these two things to meet in the middle. You want your goals to align with the market needs. So if you are trying to solve this problem in your market and you are trying to create a business that serves, X segment of the market to help them solve their problems and to allow you to achieve the type of business and lifestyle that you want, well, when you've gotten really specific and pinpointed on those things, then you can start to outline the features you need. Because what happens with a lot of entrepreneurs is they just have the app idea and then they build anything and everything they can think of to go into that app idea. But they're approaching it from the wrong direction because usually they just build anything and everything they possibly can. And then they launch and try to figure out who needs it. And they kind of just see where it goes. That's a guessing game. I don't want you to play a guessing game. I want you to design this from the ground up, right? You can plan this out. So look at your goals, look at your market needs, and when you get hyper specific on those, that's going to help you figure out exactly which features you need to build first into the first version of your app. And then you can add on from there, but you can actually have some direction, right? You can treat things like your goals and these ultimate market needs, and I'm talking about the bigger picture outcomes that they're looking to achieve, you can treat those as your North Stars, to where every single thing you do pushes you towards that and pushes your market, your users towards that. And that is what then in turn defines the features that you need and the functionality that you need to offer within your app so that those things can be achieved. Okay, so not having this undeveloped plan or not having any sort of direction or roadmap, that's a second biggest foundational area where I see people falling short and ultimately just falling flat when it comes to launching their apps. Okay, so we're going to keep moving here. Now we're going to start to get a little bit more technical. The third big problem that I see is when people have an app that does not scale, or they build their app in an unscalable way. So an unscalable app, right? Again, getting a little bit more technical here now. So first, a sort of caveat or preface to this. I'm saying this assuming that you have the first two foundational pieces in place now, okay? Or that you will, right? That you have your developed idea, that you have your developed plan, and that you are aiming to launch an app that is going to be scalable because you want to turn it into a business and grow that business, or you want to use it within an existing business and grow that business. Okay, so I'm assuming you want to do that versus creating something like what I mentioned in the beginning of the video, where you're just kind of putting together a really quick prototype to test the waters on a random idea or something like that. Okay, so that would be building a prototype that's just kind of like a litmus test. We're talking about creating scalable apps and app-based businesses. So assuming that, one of the biggest places where I see people struggling when they try to launch is that they haven't built their app in a scalable way, right? It sounds pretty obvious because it is, but it's so easy to miss the mark on this because as someone who is stepping into the no-code space, you likely don't have a technical background, or if you do, using tools like this is still new for you, right? So when you're coming into this space and you're dealing with a lot of new things, then it can be easy to end up creating an app that is unstable, that's not reliable, that's not scalable. Even if you spend a lot of time on it, right? Even if you put a lot of effort into it, it's easy to come out on the other end with a product that's just not going to grow how you want it to. So if you launch with an unscalable app, the risk you run is having to rebuild the app once you have users on board, once you have paying users on board, okay? Not ideal. I don't want you to be in that situation because, to be frank, it's just not very fun, okay? But that's the risk you run when you launch an unscalable app. Now, with the entrepreneurs who we personally work with, even for ones who have started building some components of their app, when we start working with them, every single time we still start from square one to make sure that they have a scalable foundation in place for their apps. Because again, these are all people who are wanting to launch their apps and immediately start growing them, not launch their apps and then rebuild, right? They want to launch their apps and immediately start monetizing them. Okay, so it has to be scalable. So what can you do to make sure your app is scalable? Well, a lot of things can go into this, but it essentially revolves around two main things. So number one is leveraging no-code tools correctly for your specific use cases. Again, you have to have those two base layer foundational pieces in place in our pyramid here, right? So leveraging no-code tools correctly, and then making sure you build the right things at the right time and in the right order. This is something that I have talked about in other videos. It is so simple, but it is so true and so effective. A lot of people go into their app's development and launch and they kind of just start doing everything all at once. It doesn't usually end well. There's no cohesion, there's no process, there's no order. So we have to make sure we're doing those two things. Using no-code tools correctly, making sure that we're doing all the right things at all the right times. So a really simple example of this, because again, a lot of things could go into this, both technical and strategic, right? It's not just about using the no-code tool correctly. And it's not just about having that overarching strategy of doing the right things at the right time. It's both of them together. But again, a quick example of this. So let's say that you are looking at, pull this one, keep it close right here. And we're gonna have a ladder here. Say you're looking at the phases of launching your app. So at the beginning here, or at the bottom of the ladder, we have alpha testing, okay? And right here, we're gonna have beta testing. And right here, up at the top, we're going to have rollout. So none of these are technical, right? And what I mean is they don't have anything to do with the technical features of your app or the way those features are developed, which, yes, those are important and those go into scalability too, although those the way you approach scalability is always different for different use cases. So there's no overarching, there's no quick fix for me to kind of go over with that. But looking on a more strategic side, this example definitely holds true. So right things, right time, right order. Look at your testing. Look at how you roll out the app. Doing alpha testing first means you are focusing on the functionality of your app first. Okay, so you are staying aligned with your version 1 features and you're focusing on function only. Okay, so you're making sure that you have the core features in place to have a functioning product that solves that core problem that you identified when you were looking at your market needs. Okay, and then moving along in a strategic order, you then go into your beta testing. Now, your beta testing is kind of like you're having your version 1.5 app going through testing, and you're focusing on adoption. Okay, so adoption meaning, all right, you have the functioning product. Now we're looking at how users are able to adopt that into their daily processes. How well are they able to adopt it, or maybe how not so well? How can we make it better? And then when we look at rollout, we're looking at version infinity here, because you're just going to keep iterating from here on out. Okay, and you're just looking at expansion. Okay, so you are kind of ultimately going back through the ladder again and again and again, because as you expand the app, you're going to be putting new features in place. Those new features, new feature sets will go back up this ladder, starting at alpha, moving to beta, then going to rollout. And it's just a cycle, a continuous cycle moving forward. Okay, so let me move our arrow here that we have in the wrong spot. So when you have an unscalable app, it's hard to have a successful launch. It's hard to successfully grow after that. Again, there's a lot that goes into scalability. So I do want to make that clear, both technical and strategic. When it comes to the technical components, a lot of it depends on your app. Now, there are some foundational pieces that you're going to have to put into place no matter what. Having the right database structure, for example. But again, depending on your own needs, your own goals, your own use cases, your own market needs, the way in which you make your app technically scalable is going to vary. It's going to vary from one app to the other, okay? But you're also looking at strategic pieces of doing the right things at the right time and in the right order. And this ladder here that you see on the screen is a perfect example of that. Outside of the development of your app alone, look at the launch and the testing of your app, right? Launching your app in the right order, testing for the right things at the right time. Those will help ensure a scalable app. Because if you're looking at the right things when you're testing, when you're going up this ladder, you're not just trying to do everything all at once. When you do that, it's hard to get pinpointed feedback. It's hard to see what's working and what's not, both from a technical standpoint and from a usability standpoint. It just muddies the water. So you have to make sure, again, right things, right time, right order. With your development, with the technical pieces, with the strategic pieces, with the launch, with the testing, with all of this, okay? Now, I'm saying that and it sounds like a lot, but this isn't something that happens all at once. It's not something that happens overnight. This is something that happens over time. When we're talking about creating a scalable app, it's, again, not something you do in a day. It's something that takes time and takes focus. You have to have the developed idea. You have to have the developed plan to support that. Then you can move forward in creating that scalable app. Okay. All right. So moving forward, the next thing and again, we're moving up the pyramid and getting closer and closer to launch, is the next thing is when you have no idea how to appeal to users. So I'm going to say can't appeal to users. So we've talked about strategy, we've talked about some of the technical components, and now we're talking about a little bit of messaging here, a little bit of marketing, some conversions, right? We're getting into that realm. So a really common trend I see, or rather kind of pitfall I see people coming up against, is they're really, really excited about all the features of their app, especially when they've put the time in to creating a scalable app, which, like I mentioned, it can take some time, right? And so they've spent this time getting really excited about their features. They've been thinking about and planning their app idea, right? Everything they've been doing up to this stage, they're just getting super excited about their features. They can have a really hard time then turning that around and actually conveying the value in those features. And I see a lot of people fall short here. And at the end of the day, one of the best lessons you can learn is that your users, your prospective buyers, your customers, they don't really care about the features. They do to some extent, and especially in the right circumstances. But ultimately, the features can be irrelevant if the value is high enough for them. Okay, so this goes back again to when you are looking at those, the market needs, the market gaps, we're looking at your goals, we're looking at the problems, the outcomes. You can see how all of this is coming together. When you understand those things, none of those are necessarily relevant to the technical features, right? You can talk about each of those things without mentioning a feature. You can talk about the problems, you can talk about the goals, the outcomes. You can talk about every single one of those things without talking about a technical feature, okay? But a lot of people find it hard to, right? But when you're creating messaging for your app, when you are putting up a landing page, when you are running ads, when you're having sales conversations, you have to be able to talk about the value. We were on a call the other day with some of our private entrepreneurs, and we were talking about this. One of the questions asked was, how can I best ensure that my users understand why they should be implementing this so deeply into their processes, why it's going to benefit them? And it's such an easy thing to overlook, because again, you can look at all the features that you have, and they had a beautifully complex app that they'd created with wonderful features, with valuable features. But you can look at all those features and still not know the value if you don't know how to talk about it. So how do you talk about the value? It's it starts by looking at a couple of different things. So let's draw this one right over here. When you look at let's do a mini pyramid here. When you look at conveying the value, you do look at the features, right? Obviously, that go into your app. But the more important thing you need to understand are what those features enable. Okay, we're going to call these our enablers. You look at the features, but what do they enable, right? So let's say you have a feature in your app that helps businesses track their profit and loss better. Maybe they have certain problems in their processes right now. It's going to help them track it more accurately. Okay, that's the feature, right? But what's the enabler? Well, that feature enables them to then have a more accurate view of their profit margins, so they can now identify the activities that need to go into increasing those profit margins, right? So if you were to say to someone, hey, this is going to help you track your profit and loss, you're going to say, oh, okay, well, I can do that in a lot of different ways. But if you were to say, hey, This tool is going to help you expand your profit margin so you can now focus on the activities that you need to be doing to increase revenue, all of these types of things. Well, that's going to be more hard hitting, right? Let's say you are building a feature that helps freelancers invoice the companies they work for. And you say to someone, hey, this feature is going to help you send invoices. Okay, you can send invoices in a lot of ways. But if you say, hey, this feature is going to help you get paid on time, all right, well, that starts to mean a little bit more. That starts to convey a little bit more value. Right now, we're looking at individual features here, but look at the features as they form your full app too. So instead of saying, hey, this app helps you, track your time as a freelancer, send invoices, create proposals, and X, and X, right? This app helps you do all of those things. Okay, great. As a freelancer, maybe they're already doing all those things. So knowing that literally an app helps them with those features or those processes might not mean all that much. But if you said, hey, this app is going to help you combine each of these things that you do every single day into one platform, and it's going to automate half of your admin tasks per day, and it's going to give you back up to X hours a day, so that now you can focus on generating more leads, so you can make more money, you can bring more clients on board. It's going to help you get paid on time, so you can spend less time tracking down those late invoices, and on and on and on. Now we're looking at value. That's something that you can attach a price tag to. That's something that can turn using your app into a no-brainer. The features can't do that. Yes, the features are important. The features have to be in place to help enable the outcome. But the outcome is the thing that really matters, right? And one of the traps I see so many people falling into is that they just can't appeal to users. They can talk about their app all day long, every day, but they can't appeal to users. So you have to make sure that you can do both, okay? Make sure you can convey the value of your app. Okay, moving on, the very last thing. One of the biggest reasons why these launches end up falling flat and their apps and businesses just don't grow as they had envisioned, really, is that there is no plan for what happens once users come on board. Okay, so no plan after onboarding. So what I usually see is one of two things. When entrepreneurs launch, either they launch to crickets if they haven't done any of these other pieces of the pyramid, or if they haven't put any of these other pieces in place, right? They launch to crickets, or they launch to chaos, right? So let's say they have these other foundational pieces in place, but they miss out on this very last one. Then they launch to chaos. We don't want either of those. We don't want the crickets. We don't want the chaos. We want the conversions and we want the usage, again, but without the chaos. So the chaos essentially happens when, like I said, you have these other foundational pieces in place. Users come on board, but then you don't really know what to do with them. So you don't know what to do with them, and they don't really know what to do with you. Okay, so it leads to a lot of uncertainty, a lot of confusion, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. So you have to have a plan for once users do come on board, and it doesn't have to be very complicated. This can be pretty simple. Okay, so what I want you to do is think about a couple of things. You want to think about communication. Okay, so communication, and you want to think about feedback loops. These are both really simple things you can do to put a quick plan in place for once you launch to your initial users. first things first, communicate with them. Make sure that they understand their beta users, so that they understand what's going to be happening, what they should expect, what their role is in coming on the app right at the start. Okay, because some people, what causes them to kind of miss the mark is they don't communicate at all that they're in beta testing, and they have no way to get feedback from their users because they haven't communicated this. And users come onto the app and they have this product, but the product needs perfecting, right? Because it needs feedback. That's just how it is. That's normal and that's expected. But the users just aren't aware of this. So it can cause problems. That can cause chaos, right? For you, and a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. You also have to have feedback loops. You have to have, let's say you've communicated. Well, now you have to have ways to pinpoint the specific type of feedback that you need to get in order to strategically and logically scale your app and grow your business. You have to know what type of feedback you need to get. You have to know how you're going to intake it, and you have to know how you're going to prioritize and use it, okay? This is often ignored because talking about feedback loops isn't really the sexy thing to talk about. It's not the fun and exciting thing to talk about, but it's one of those foundational pieces that when you launch, you have to have it in place, or else again, chaos, and you're going to have a hard time scaling from there, because you're going to have a lot of, well, number one, you're going to be doing a lot of guesswork, but you're also going to have a lot of unhappy users because they're not able to give you feedback and you don't know how to intake it from them. So if you launch and you just say, okay, I'm going to see what happens, and even if you do really want to get feedback, but you just don't have a plan for it, if you're just kind of waiting and seeing and assuming that people are going to tell you what you need to hear, then you're in for a surprise, because people aren't going to take the time to just figure out how they need to help you. That's not their role. So you have to communicate with them what their role is, and you need to figure out what you need from them so that you can actually get it from them in a way that serves them, right? Your intent has to be, again, to figure out those market needs, right? So you have to intake the feedback so that you are pinpointing exactly how you need to, exactly what information you need in order to improve the app, the channel in which you're going to bring that in, or the medium, and then how you're going to use it, how you're going to implement it, and how you're going to, again, communicate back. So it's just, I have this drawn up here as kind of like a little cycle because of that, because it is a cycle, communication and feedback. So if you don't have a plan for once you launch, if you do have all of these things down here, right, but you miss the one at the top, it's going to be a lot of chaos. And if you don't have the things down here, then it's going to be crickets, most likely, right? We don't want either. We want a smooth transition from being in alpha to being in beta, and then to being in rollout. And these components here, each of these will build on top of the other to help you ultimately grow and scale your app and your app-based business. So I hope that's helpful for you. These are all things they're just common roadblocks that people come up against. There's a reason for it all, and it all makes sense, but I want you to avoid it. And so I hope that you move forward and keep these in mind, figure out which stage you're at in that pyramid, and whether you need to do some backtracking now to make sure that you can move up it correctly afterwards, or whether you need to just change your plan moving forward so that you can keep moving forward correctly with your app. Now, if you are just starting out with your app, or maybe you haven't started it yet, but you do want to follow a strategic plan so that you can take the right next steps and not have to guess, we have a free workshop training that you can join in on. It's at coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop. It'll walk you through a deep dive into some of the initial strategy that you need to put in place with your app to make sure that you build and launch it correctly. We'll also talk about ways to leverage no-code tools correctly for your app. So you can head to coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop. And we'd love to have you on board for that. But again, I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.